Hello there. So here we have an LSAT problem that you can try. You can pause the video, try it for yourself, and once you're ready, you can unpause it. We'll go over the answer and some strategies as well. So the correct answer for this one is E. And if you got that, excellent. And if not, well, we'll go over it, and hopefully next time you see a similar problem, you'll get it correct. Okay, so let's go over it together. We'll read it and discuss it. So it starts with, for the near future, if the tax rate is increased, then there's a chance of recession. So it's a conditional, an if then. And the next sentence is also if then. If there's a possibility of a recession, then it raises the possibility of a populist uprising. And finally, we have none of the Nordic countries have any chance of developing a recession in the near future. And if we look at the top right, we can see what they're asking. If the preceding sentences are assumed to be true, then what also must be true? So we have a must be true question. And it should be noted that for this one, it's not an argument. So there's no conclusion. It's just a set of facts. And it's what can you deduce and infer from those set of facts. The second thing to note is that the last sentence mentions Nordic countries, yet the first two sentences do not, and they could be in reference to any country, whether it's Canada, the USA, France, Great Britain, or any other countries you could possibly think. And it's always good to think in those terms, like how specific or broad the statements are. Now we could go into the details, and in this case, we want to be mindful of these conditionals and see how they link with each other. So if you look on the bottom left, I mapped out the three conditionals, the first sentence, the second sentence, and the third sentence. It should be pretty clear for the first two sentences, but the last sentence is a little bit tricky. It could be difficult to translate that into a conditional. And the reason why the last sentence is difficult is the word none. So in simple terms, last sentence saying none of these Nordic countries have a chance of getting a recession. So none of them have this chance. So in other words, if you are them, you're not going to have a recession or a chance of it. So pretty much that none goes on the back end. If that's still confusing, another example would be no cat is a dog. So no cat is a dog basically means if you happen to see a cat, it can't be a dog. So once again, that no goes in the back end, the necessary condition. And there's one last thing we need to discuss before looking at the answers. So you can know that these conditionals you could link up. And there's a couple different ways, but one possible way is if you look at the first and second conditional, they both talk about recession. So basically, if you have a tax increase, then there's the possibility of an uprising. And now finally, we could look at the answers. So let's look at answer A. If the tax rate is increased, then there will probably be a populist uprising, which might seem good, because if you remember our conditional chain, if we have tax increase, then we have possibility uprising. But there's one word that makes all the difference, and that word is probably. In the initial argument, they mentioned possibility, which is different from probably. So when looking at these answer choices, you should always think about how strong or weak they are. So probably is a bit different than just the chance of it. Next, we could look at B. The Nordic countries will never have a recession. And once again, we could think about the language. In this case, it's very strong. We have the word never. And if you go back to initial argument, they say, at the end, the Nordic countries won't have a recession in the near future. But that's just a near future. Maybe 500 years from now, they could have a recession. So from that fact alone, you cancel out B. Next, we have C. If there is a possibility of a populist uprising, then the tax rate is increased. For this one, it's a reversal. So basically, they're going backwards from uprising to tax increase, which doesn't make sense from the two initial conditions that we saw on the bottom left. It would be equivalent to saying that if we have this conditional, if you're in Florida, then you're in the United States, and then you flip it. If you're in the United States, then you are in Florida, which is obviously not true because you could be in other places, such as Montana. Next up, we have D. If a country is Nordic, then it will lower its tax rate. And this one's a little bit different from what they said about taxes. In the statements above, they talk about tax rate increasing, yet this is tax rate lowering, which is different. It doesn't mean it's wrong, but something you have to consider. And if you think about it, and looking at these conditionals, it doesn't work out. In addition, if you negate tax increase, that doesn't mean tax decrease or lower taxes. It could also mean flat taxes. So that's something else you have to also consider. And finally, we have E, the correct answer. None of the Nordic countries will raise their tax rate. And once again, I just want to remind you that for E, that is a conditional. It's similar to the last sentence of the statements that was given at the beginning. So let's translate E into a conditional. So none of these countries will raise their tax. So in other words, it's saying if you're a Nordic country, then you will not raise your tax. And your next question might be, why does that matter? Well, taxes relates back to recessions from the first conditional. And looking at the third conditional with Nordics, they're talking about recession. So if you have tax increase, then you have recession. But the Nordics don't have that. So therefore, if you're a Nordic, you can never have the tax increase. And that's it. We're done. So I hope it's helpful, and stay tuned and we'll make some more of these.